All right. Well, welcome to Team Brothership. I'm your host, Mike, joined here by co-host and host of Without Parole, Bryan. How are you doing, Bryan?
Good. It always feels weird that I'm on Team Brothership because I feel like I'm interfering with the family thing, and the family thing is like not we're not brothers, right? It's like, well, actually, no blood relation at least. So I feel like I'm infiltrating some established system that's going on here.
I mean, that might have been true like a year ago before or like back before my brother had his second kid, but it's been a while since he's been on an episode. This is all about the brotherliness of gamers, you know. We're all in the brotherhood of people who play video games.
So you've changed the definition of Team Brothership to suit the current situation.
I mean, that's pretty much how it works most of the time in reality these days. I feel like language is a suggestion, not an actual like point of fact.
That works for me. That works for me. Mike, I feel like it's been a little while since we've done one of these things. Like
I know, I was
were
busy.
kind of on a good trajectory. Oh, good. It was you. Okay,
Yeah. No,
I was
Alex.
about to apologize.
Yeah.
And so I take that back. Let's pretend like you were apologizing to me. Go ahead. Carry on.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really sorry that I've been busy with actual life things like family and friends and.
Yeah. Dude, I've been crazy busy too. This is just a busy time for video games. I know that when we were growing up, Christmas was the time because the Christmas
Yeah.
season, the fall season leading up to it was just a busy time for video games, and I think for a little while that went away, right? Because there was like, well, gamers are growing up, and they just have disposable income, they can buy games all year long. For whatever reason, it feels like it's coming back, at least in the VR space, because it's just like I'm getting slammed every other week with another big release. So I've been pretty busy myself.
Yeah, I think for a while it kind of seemed like they stopped doing that a little bit because so many big name games were missing their release window, and so it changed from like December being the big release window or like November, December to like February, March because everything was coming out late. And then game companies realized, oh, we can just release things half finished and like patch them later, and it's fine. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we all care.
Yeah,
We're,
we all care.
but not enough to do anything about it. Like stop, pre-ordering or buying
Right.
games on day one.
Right.
We say we care, but then we don't do jack about it.
Yeah. No. It's definitely, this is always like October, November for not game related reasons is always a very busy time of year for me too. So
Do you think there was that time where gamers grew up and they had disposable income, and so like it didn't matter when they released games, but now those gamers are having kids that are gamers, and so now suddenly it does matter when you release a game again because there's a whole new generation that don't have disposable income and have to wait until their birthday or Christmas or whatever.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think we are shifting away from basically what you described, like the folks who were the kind of OG gamers who grew up with like, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis,
Yeah.
God forbid Atari, are now like,
Those people aren't gamers anymore.
yeah, they're,
Those
yeah.
people are like Stampede, really done.
I thought you were gonna say they're all dead because it's just been too much time.
Dude, I grew up playing Atari 2600, so I mean, although I guess that checks out. I'm pretty close, right?
Just
I figured
crumbled to dust with the ages.
Yeah, I figured over the course of the next year, I'm going to fall off the wagon and make sure I do a few more things on my bucket list because, I mean, we got to be coming close. Might as well enjoy the last year or two.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no. Well, have you talked on your show about like that you've been doing a big renovation project at your place too? Is that common knowledge, or is that like a secret that we got to bleep out?
Oh, no, that's common knowledge. And I use it as my excuse for not getting anything done, which is nice because some days I just don't feel like working. And then I go, massive renovations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Check back next month.
Well, I mean, having been in your place, I don't know what it looks like now, but I was there a few weeks ago, and it was like basically like right off of where your camera is. There's just like giant exposed beams and like just hole. Like I was gonna say a hole in the wall, but there are no walls. It's just like you're just open to the sea. You got those plastic tarps to just keep the wind from coming in.
Yeah, it's so things have settled down quite a bit. The major renovations are almost done. There's already a half brick wall built on
Oh, cool.
that side of the apartment, and so this one, by the time you see me on camera next, there should be brick behind me as well.
Nice.
So, yeah. So there's a couple things they measured for blinds today. I've had no blinds for like a month because when they were taking the ceiling down, they had to like take the blinds down.
Sure.
And they're like we're not going to put these back up. And I was like, I know they're trash. And so they're like, do you want us to dispose of them? I'm like, yes. But we didn't know how long it was going to be for the new blinds to show up. And so 6 o'clock every morning, beam of light shines right into this eye. So it means my sleep schedule has dramatically changed for the worse. But we're finally wrapping things up. The 3 to 4 week project should be done in, I guess, grand total, but about 9 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds about right for a construction project, I would say.
Yep.
You get a new cat post back there too. New cat post construction.
This is all the same stuff, but I pushed it over so they could work on the wall today. And with any luck, Tornado will join us because we just finished up Gamescast, Monday night's Gamescast, and she was chilling out behind me for a good portion of it, which is always nice because no one's interested in what I have to say. The second a cat shows up, they're like, "Oh, finally something interesting."
Yeah, they all want to see the kitty. It's anytime that I'm in like a work meeting and like a virtual meeting for work and like somebody's cat or dog wanders in, they're always like, "Oh, so I'm sorry." It's like, do not apologize. No one is ever upset when that happens. Like,
yep, there is a fascination with pets and the fact that I haven't caved and just made without parole all Tornado all the time.
Yeah, just set up one of those live cameras.
There is no chance that it wouldn't get more views, more subscribers, more engagement than what I'm doing right now. And guess what? It would be 1% of the work on my end. 1%.
Yeah.
I would never have to work again, and I would have the best subscriber base. and I wouldn't even have to be on camera anymore, man. I could just like eat pizza and get fat. It'd be great.
There you go. That's a future for us all. Yeah, I should do that too. My cats are pretty photogenic, so.
I agree. Your cats are adorable.
So yeah, I noticed before I derailed you were starting to talk about actual games and what we signed on to talk about today. I really, that was the other problem, is like I was kind of stumbling to come up with an idea for what we could talk about next, and then you threw out that real banger of video game collections and like, yeah.
I mean, listen, I get excited about Kickstarter projects. I do. Like when something gets announced that really speaks to me, I get real excited. And so I'm sure most people who are watching this are already familiar with the Electronic Gaming Monthly Compendium that got announced on Kickstarter and then proceeded to blow away goal after goal after goal. They were only asking $35,000, and I think there's still like a week left in this thing.
Good, because I haven't bid yet. I haven't put in my money yet, so.
Well, you might want to. There might not even be a week left at this point. But they've gotten 2,000 times that amount. I don't even know. I'm bad at math. They got $702,000 instead of $35,000. And dude, so I was like, well, this is everything I wanted it to be, right? I'm a huge fan of Electronic Gaming Monthly. I have almost every issue, but I'd like to sell those because they take up a lot of room. And so I was like, I think I'll be happy if I get this book. But then I looked, and like the first 2 tiers were, I think, $50 just to get the hardcover book, and then the next one up was like $150, and I was like, oof, I think I'll just do the 50. Well, in the last week, I completely pivoted. I was like, Bryan, what are you doing? This is probably the Kickstarter you've been most excited about, maybe ever. And so I said, so not only did I decide to do the 150, a lot of that came from the fact that I think with the 150 tier, you get the entire PDF collection of every Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine.
Oh, wow. That's a big
right?
deal. Yeah.
And so to be able to have that digitally and just be able to swipe through it and not, I could just leave a tablet in the bathroom for the rest of my life and be happy forever. Because you've been in my bathroom. It's just Electronic Gaming Monthly stacked up on the floor.
Yeah.
That's my bathroom reading material. So this spoke to me. Like, it's cool that you're going to back it too, because I feel like everybody should have this.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, like everybody that I know was texting me that link. I think I saw the like combo chat that we have with a few other people. Like people posted that. I got it from like my brother, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think John emailed us too. I was like, "What? What did you? What? Okay, just in case we didn't see it, I guess."
He really was concerned. He didn't want us missing out.
Yeah. And if anybody doesn't know, if you don't mind me just reading this, because I think it's fascinating, like what they're actually
Oh
including.
yeah, no, go ahead.
So yeah, for anybody unfamiliar with the Kickstarter, it says the EGM Compendium is more than just a book; it's a journey through time. Spanning over 320 pages of rich video game history, from the well-known to the largely forgotten to the downright bizarre. The compendium charts the development of the most noteworthy games, franchises, cultural shifts, and industry trends from throughout EGM's quarter century of publication. New insights from the editors who worked on the magazine offer a behind-the-scenes look at the magazine's creation, while contributions from the gaming industry veterans and modern influencers add richer context. This description kind of reminds me why I haven't sold off my collection of Electronic Gaming Monthly magazines yet, because there's this amazing video game history that lies just beneath the surface that we're all familiar with, to games that almost got released. Like that,
Yeah.
You can flip through magazines and there are advertisements for. There was a game that Irrational Games was making before BioShock that was this close to releasing on PS2. This close. And you know it was this close because there's an advertisement in the magazine with screenshots with the PlayStation 2 logo. You know, there's canceled games that had advertisements. There's previews of lots of canceled games. It's like there's so much more to video game history than just like what's on people's bookshelves. And so that's the stuff I don't want to forget, and that's the stuff I'm always really interested in, because I feel like I know most of the surface level stuff.
Right.
I've played most of the surface level stuff, and so it just kind of sparked something in me, in my imagination, and saying, well, what other parts of this just below the surface video game history, how do we preserve all of that? How do we compile all of that? Like what are other ways other than this cool Electronic Gaming Monthly compendium that we can sort of chronicle the history of video games? Because I think it is slowly being forgotten.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things, obviously, that I've been very concerned with. You know, I've said it a few times on the show, like I'm a librarian, so like preservation and that kind of thing is important to me. And you know, we're definitely moving in a direction. It's not just video games, but I feel like video games are definitely catching more of the flack for this. I feel like all media is becoming very like disposable. That's one of the reasons why I've never really latched on to like streaming. You know, I mean, it all started as like a very disposable format, and then I feel like with physical media, like a lot of this stuff became much more tangible and like real, and now it's like pivoting back towards being very disposable. And yeah, it's scary, like not just as, you know, as a collector. Like I have a big video game collection, you know, you still have a pretty decent video game collection, and like
for having sold my collection, it's shocking how much of a collection I still have.
Yeah, it's still pretty impressive. And like it's not just that though, it's like, yeah, when we lose these things, we kind of lose the ability to grow from them too. Like if people can't look back and rediscover old games and interesting things, like they're not gonna, you know, creativity, nothing ever springs forth completely completely formed from somebody's brain. Like every creativity is very iterative, even the most creative things. And so like the more history that we lose, the more potential growth we're cutting off as well.
Yeah. So I feel as though this EGM compendium has got to kind of start its own trend. Mm-hmm. Like, because as much as EGM covered a whole lot of stuff, you know, a very significant part of video games, it wasn't everything, right? And there's been plenty of other magazines that have kind of come and gone, and I really hope that seeing the success of this EGM compendium, the publishers of Next Generation magazine are looking into this, the publishers of GamePro, even things that are smaller like Megaplay, PSM, Dude, I found some Turbo Graphics specific magazines in my magazine collection, my video game. It's like I think it's is it Turbo Play? I forget what it's even called, but it's like who has those? Right? Somebody should, and somebody should make a hardcover book and being like either documenting, especially for something like that probably had like 10 issues. Just collect them all and put them all into a compendium. But I really do hope that this is the kind of stuff that just doesn't get forgotten, because it is, I think, so important to so many of us. Like Electronic Gaming Monthly was my magazine growing up. That my favorite month. No, I'm sorry. My favorite day of each month was the day that I got home and, oh crap, there's a new Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine in the mailbox. And when it got closer to September, October, November, December, and it started like doubling and tripling and quadrupling in size, and 90% of it was ads, but we didn't care. It was like, oh my god, I got a new gaming Bible in the mail this month. It was amazing. It was such a great feeling, and like you don't want to just like lose that, right?
No.
But I also at the same time don't want to take up half my apartment with hundreds of Electronic Gaming Monthlies, right?
Yeah.
So, so other than say like magazine compendiums, like what ways should we be? I feel like I just took control in that.
No. It's. I mean, it was kind of your topic, but I think I get where you're going with this. And I think when you first texted me about this, my thought was of like actual, collections of games, like compilation discs and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's been something that I've always been, really excited about, because like, it's great to be able to get all of like a series in one set. And I feel like as, recently, I feel like there have been a lot of them coming out too. I feel like my brother Paul always makes fun of me because I'm always talking up the Switch and how much I love the Switch, but the Switch has like so many game collections on it. Like there's basically any game that I could ever play from. Oh, is she coming up?
She's just sitting on the floor meowing at me. Sometimes distract her. Any game that I want to play on like any other system is basically available on the Switch now, but not to turn it into a Switch cast. But there's so much good stuff out there now. I mean, a lot of my favorite series like Mega Man, now Castlevania, and Mario, there's been tons of them. Like you can get collections of, if not the entire run of the series, at least some kind of stretch that makes sense. And I think some of the better ones have some like historical context and notes and things with them. So the interesting thing is, and I hate saying that I haven't played it because I haven't, but I desperately want to. I want to find time to do it. I haven't played Atari 50.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And because stick with me here. We're going to go on a little. This might be a bit of a tangent, but like I was thinking about, like we have so many great collections, like you were talking about, and Switch, right? So this is the Wonder Boy collection.
Oh yeah.
But then I open it up and it's like, oh, here's the tiniest manual of all time, and like nothing else. Like it's awesome to put this cartridge in, and then have access to, however many different Wonder Boy games and all the different versions. I think that's really cool when you start like throwing in, oh, this is the Game Boy version, this is the Game Gear version, this is the Japanese Game Gear version, and so you could get to see all these minute differences that you didn't even know existed when we were kids, when we were playing these games when we were little. But so I like the completionist aspect of when games are presented that way, but I want something more. I want something that feels like I'm embarking on the history of this franchise. Like, right, I want there to be a hardcover book that this was inside of, right? That does talk to the developers. That tells you the history. Where did the origin of Wonder Boy come from? Like, what was his design? Where did they take his design from? Like, I want to know. Like, just get into the nitty gritty. Show me screenshots from unreleased Wonder Boy games. Put an unreleased Wonder Boy game on here, even if it's broken. Like, what? And I think Atari 50, from what I've seen, like again, sadly I have not played, it does take you through the history of Atari. Like, it's not just an archive or a collection of all these old games, right? Because we've seen collections of those games before. This actually pulls you through the history and like tells a story.
Yeah.
Right? Is that accurate? Have you played it?
I haven't, no, but I know that there are definitely some. I'm trying to like, I've played so many of the collections, I'm struggling to think of them now.
Right.
What
The Karateka one, or Karateka, depending on the Jordan Mechner game. Like I love that game on C64, and like that's another one apparently that was done very much in the same vein as Atari 50.
Yeah, it made me think, this is immediately pivoting away from that, but when you were talking, that made me think, have you looked through any of like the Capcom art books that Udon published like
No.
maybe 10 years ago or so? Because I don't have all of them, but I've read a number of them, and they did a Mega Man one and they did a Mega Man X one. And those are both phenomenal because they have like, they have all the standard art from all the games, but it's also accompanied, a lot of the artwork is accompanied by commentary by the artist talking about like, oh, I was inspired by this, or oh, I thought about this, or like, and they'll even have kind of responding commentaries, because somebody will be like, oh, well, my original design was like this, and then it's like their editor was like, yeah, I hated that, so I made him do this instead, or something like that. And it's really interesting. And they'll have like some, not a ton of it, but like some kind of draft artwork and some like, less, more unreleased pieces, or more niche things, like stuff they had in like newsletters. But I feel like you really, really get a good feel for like the vibes, and like you can even tell some of the games that were like crap, like why they were crap, because you listen to people talk about the designs, and it was like nobody cared, they were super rushed, or like, they just had to do this on an unreasonable deadline, or they had some other project they were working on that took precedence. But those are really, really cool. And it's not, you're not getting like the screenshots and everything, but you're getting, at least from a design perspective, a really, really clear understanding of like what they were going for.
Well, I really like that idea, and like I have a tendency not to just buy like art books. I had gone down that rabbit hole a little bit at one point in my life, and I was like, "Ooh, the Dead Space art book," and I was like, "I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be doing this." Right? It's too much. Like, how much stuff do I need to collect in my life? And so, what I think the problem is, what publishers and developers are competing against these days is the ability and the ease of downloading an entire ROM set.
Yeah.
In seconds, right? Every OG Game Boy game ever made in just like a couple megabytes, and then boom, you got them all right there. And so, but what's been fascinating is seeing that real collectors and real fans of retro gaming, like that stuff is fine, like to be able to access those games.
Sure.
But there's still a desire to be like, oh no, this is something that I love. This is something that's special to me in my childhood, or just as a fan of retro gaming, I love this. And so like, give us something special. Take those art books and combine them with, like the idea of like giving us every single version of all those Mega Man games into something big that'll stand the test of time, like to make it like the ultimate collection, right? And like that's why like the combination of a hardcover book with all the art and the interviews and everything, along with the Wonder Boy style collection, is sort of what I'm looking at here, because like it's again, these games take up almost no space, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to burn them onto like 5 Blu-rays or something in order to get all the games to us. It's very, very simple. That aspect of it is simple, and so you got to turn the whole thing into an experience. And I think that's kind of like, as a person, that's where I'm at, right? Because I'm like getting older and trying to get rid of more stuff from my collection. But like, I want there to be things on the shelf that are just like the ultimate version of this specific collection. And so I've started getting into a little bit of I'm looking for Geeks Line books. But
No,
Geeks Line has,
no, I haven't.
They've got some really good anthologies and compendiums, and this one's still in its packaging because there's still so much crap around here from the construction that we were just talking about. I don't even want to take it out of the plastic yet, but this is the N64 anthology, right? So every page is like, here's the artwork, here's the manual, here's like here's screenshots, here's a description of the game and everything. And like, so just like being able to kind of access these games without actually having access to the games, like all here, is very cool, and they've done good ones for all sorts of different systems, right? And so and I discovered them because they were also kickstarting a an anthology for PlayStation 2, I think, and I think it was 4 volumes, 4 hardcover volumes,
wow.
documenting like every PlayStation 2 game that there is. You could never own on bookshelves every PlayStation 2 game, but how cool would it be to like be like, oh, here's my, here's my dictionary, my atlas thesaurus. None of these make sense, but of all those games,
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. So, I mean, that was going to be my question to you, kind of then, because, it's not like, say, if you wanted an ultimate collection of like some author's work, then you get the big book that's like or you get a set of books, like getting a game collection. You're not getting necessarily, like you were saying, you're not getting the history, like you're just getting the game. So would it be like, are you really thinking of like almost like a Criterion style release of different games, where it's like a really nice version of the game, maybe with some extras and some prototypes and things bundled with like a little history, like history of that game, or like I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's one way of going about it, right? But I do feel like we're at such a weird place in video games. Right? I think there's a lot of people who've been doing this for a really long time that are suddenly struggling to figure it out. Like we just found out in the last couple of days that Sony's completely restructuring their PlayStation division in order to figure out how do we do this, man? We got 20 first-party studios, and like none of them seem to be able to put out a game.
Yeah.
Right? Something's wrong. Right? And so while these big studios are trying to figure this stuff out, there's plenty of ways to make money, but you have to like look to the past, and you have to like start like figure out how to repackage stuff and make it special for the people who these properties are special to. And which leads me to sort of kind of wonder why there are so many missing collections out there. Like the last time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I probably am, the last time we had a Panzer Dragoon collection was Japan only PlayStation 2.
Yeah, I was even thinking like because that's one of those ones where I know some of the folks within Sega have gone on record saying like, oh, we like lost the source code for those games. I think Panzer Dragoon Orta on the Xbox, you could unlock like the rest of not Panzer Dragoon Saga, but like you could unlock the rest of the games from that one. So yeah, like right around that era would have been the last time.
So I don't even know like what you do once you've lost the source code, right? Like can you rebuild it? Like how does that all work? I don't know. But the fact is whatever you have to do to get those games accessible again, right? And even if it's like kind of like building it from scratch, like with the reference of just the finished product, Panzer Dragoon 1, 2, Saga, Orta. There's a Game Gear game that like sucks.
Yeah, I would have to. I was gonna say I've never even heard of that one. It must be pretty bad.
It's so bad. Like I mean, even by Game Gear standards, it's really bad. And then there was Panzer Dragoon Remake, right? So that we just got a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. So being, I mean, that would probably be the ultimate one for me, right? I want a big, not from Limited Run, but maybe from Limited Run, because they handled, I'll tell you, they handled the Jack and Dexter stuff really well.
Yeah.
Because you know what I'm talking about, right? With the mega books that the Jack
I think I saw those, yeah.
Those were so cool. And to have something like big and epic like that just looks great on your bookshelf, that has all of these Panzer Dragoon games in it again and again, just like the entire history from Sega. Like these are games, like I don't think Saga's ever been re-released.
No, it's as far as I know, once they were done with it, like whatever happened with Sega around that time, they like lost that and the code for a couple other games too.
Yeah, and that's a shame. That is exactly why these things need to exist, because I mean, I'm sure everybody that's listening to this knows, but like Saga came out after the death of the Saturn. Like the Saturn was completely done by then. It was one of the last. It was one of the last titles that came out. Right?
I think Magic Knight Ray Earth was the absolute last game to come out in the U.S. anyways.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the last Burning Rangers was a late one, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And so was Saga.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it was on a console that no one owned anymore. No one was playing anymore. And then they only released like a handful of copies, a few thousand copies, because they knew that no one was going to buy it. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, we're not going to ever re-release this. Like, figure it out, Sega. Figure it out. Like, so too many good games with that same exact story. Give me a Shadowgate compilation too.
Oh yeah. No, I mean the Saturn stuff. When you first mentioned this to me, I was like, oh god, there's so much stuff on the Saturn that like, it's just like gone forever. Like, House of the Dead. Like we've gotten a few collections over the years of like 2 and 3 bundled together, or like, 3 and I don't know. I was gonna say I thought 3 and Overkill were bundled at one point, but maybe not. And I don't think 4 has ever had a physical release at all. Like, in fact, that for a while that one was stuck like purely in arcades. That was like a fairly recent like re-release.
The first time I ever played 3 and 4, I believe, was on PlayStation 3 with the Move controllers.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time I ever played those games. And then Typing of the Dead, of course, being the best one of the group.
Yeah, that would be tough, but maybe they could bundle that in. But yeah, there's so much stuff on the Saturn. The two consoles that I think of the most when I think of compilations, because we've lost so much of their stuff, is the Saturn and the TurboGrafx. Because that stuff, I feel like Sega, we've gotten a lot of compilations of, especially their first-party stuff, but other things. Nintendo, we've gotten some of their big names over the years. A lot of, like, the Final Fantasies and the big-name RPGs have been rebundled and compiled and things. But the TurboGrafx, we've never seen Bonk again. Where's Bonk the Caveman?
You didn't like his GameCube re-release? Remember that when on Japanese GameCube,
yeah,
Japanese PS2,
yeah,
it was like a pretty rough remake of the original.
Was that I do vaguely remember that. Was that same studio that does all those other like budget, the Simple? Was that part of the Simple series?
I don't think so, but I'm more than happy to be corrected on that.
It was definitely budget, but yeah, I mean that's the last time we've seen him, and that was pretty mediocre. And like all of his like classic games, Air Zonk is a genuinely awesome game.
Yeah, but Super Air Zonk, not so much.
Not as much, no.
Right, but I still want it in the collection. Like, just because I'm putting it down doesn't mean I don't want it as part of the collection.
But yeah, a lot of that like niche stuff. I mean, it's the same with film. Like the really big name films get their re-releases and updates, and they get their prints cleaned up and that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of the little like niche stuff that you see. Although, what is it? M2 has been doing a lot of great work lately with a lot of stuff, but especially with the shooters. What's their Shot Triggers series, where they'll take like old shmups and like port them to new systems and clean them up and bundle some like history and stuff with that. I don't think many of those have come out, at least not physically in the States, but I know you can get a lot of that stuff import.
So what would be the optimal way for people to repackage these games? Like, again, we've seen small compilations where you were referencing the Castlevania collections earlier, which I think are awesome. Like, don't get me wrong. I got the Advanced collection and the DS collection on PS5, so they could play them on my Portal. Right?
Nice.
Like, this is amazing. Yeah, and I love what they did to make in lieu of the touchscreens and all that.
Yeah.
I think it actually plays better without the touchscreen stuff.
Yeah. No, agreed.
But I think those don't go far enough for me. Right? It drives me crazy that it's like, oh, I got to buy the Advanced collection and the DS collection, and like this is another collection for the early 8-bit stuff. It was like this is drives me up the wall, man. Like I need everything all in the same place. and it just feels so not lazy, right? Because like obviously they put some really good work into it, but like Capcom's certainly not the company they used to be,
No.
right? So I don't know, man. Like, what if you were to kind of like be able to wipe the slate clean? Like, how would you want? You mentioned the TurboGrafx stuff or the PC Engine stuff. That was like very, it's rare in the sense that like no one even knows about it.
Right. Yeah.
How would you want that repackaged? Would you want it done by series? Would you want it done by, hey, here's a console collection, right? Where it's like we actually got all these studios together, or we figured out who owns the rights to these different things, and then created this, this awesome PC Engine just collection. Would you want it done that way, or would you want it done by company or series? Like, what would be the optimal way? Like, ignoring how difficult it might be on their end,
Right.
because we don't care about them. We just want our games. Like, how would you want it done?
So there's kind of two ways that I feel like work well, and they're different, but I think you can kind of go in either direction. I mean, I think going the series route is always, smart, and that works really well. Like that recent Final Fantasy compilation that did like 1 through 6, putting aside the fact that they are the mobile ports of those games, so they have some like kind of weird art asset. Like I played through some of them. Like they're okay. Something like that, where it's like the whole series. Because now, like, if you buy the right versions, you can literally have every Final Fantasy 1 through 12. Well, not 11, but that doesn't count. 1 through 12 on like the Switch. You can have like all on one console. So I think that works really well, and especially I think that lends itself to like what you were saying, some kind of having it bundled with like retrospectives and art assets and that kind of thing. So I think if you're going the direction of like real deep dive into preservation, then it makes sense to go series by series, because that also I think makes it a little bit easier to maybe pull together some of the people that you need to get interviews and information, and like dig out some of the files and assets. But I think if you're going for like, hey, let's introduce this stuff to the next generation, we haven't really talked about these yet, but those micro consoles that were making the rounds for a while were basically
Right.
compilations, and I think a number of those did a fantastic job of like, here's a I don't want to say bite size, because some of them had a lot of stuff on them, but like, here is a cross section of what you could do with this console. Like, we feel like this library is like a perfect representation of what this console did. And I think that could work really well, especially if you built in with it like an interface. Have you played is it called the Sega Ages or the Sega Genesis collection that came out it was a number of years ago now. It was like Switch, PS4, I think it was the Xbox.
I'm gonna guess that I probably haven't. I think the last Sega collection I played was on PS3, and it was like Sonic's Genesis collection, but it was a pretty awesome group of games.
Yeah, it's very similar. I think this probably was just like a slightly updated version of that, but it's like,
you know what? I think I did play this, because I want to say the PS4 version gave you an option to play in VR.
oh, maybe.
And so you were actually sitting in a kid's bedroom with
Yep.
like 80s posters, and then you could just sitting in front of a CRT television with all of the boxes to your right.
Could you look away when like your mom brought in snacks and you get killed because like your mom distracted you, or she like told you it was time to do your homework or have dinner?
I gotta say, it was a cool way to collect
Yeah.
some games and give you that nostalgia, but at the same time, I was like, this is absolutely, I do not want to play these games in VR staring at a CRT television. I want to play these games blown up to 50 inches and see every single pixel sharp.
Right.
You can turn off those scanline filters, please and thank you.
Yeah. But I think that kind of setup works really well too, especially if you're going to focus more on the history of like the platform or the console and kind of like the evolution, and show like, oh, okay, here were early releases and here were later releases, and you can see how people learn the architecture better, and because especially like that Super Nintendo one, I think
So good.
aside from Turtles in Time and ActRaiser, I think that was like a perfect collection of Super Nintendo games.
You think if those two games were added, it would have been
Yeah,
a
because I
perfect
think
collection?
I think those were both missing. But
I honestly think Nintendo missed a beat, and anyone else who made one of those consoles missed a beat, because what would have been very cool was to be like, hey, this is your starter system, and like we've included 30 games on it, but we've also got internal storage, and you can connect to Wi-Fi, and you can buy additional games for this for $6 a piece, and then each one of those comes with the cartridge art in the description,
Yeah.
and like the whole thing, because those interfaces I thought were really great.
Yeah.
The TurboGrafx one specifically, like, actually showed the hue card going into the system. I was like, this is so cool, man. It's like it might be cooler than actually owning a PC engine, because it outputs to HDMI and got all these games just ready to go.
yeah.
Oops, sorry, sirens on my end.
That's all right. I was going to comment earlier that like your view though now our city is not the prettiest, but it looks really nice through that big picture window there in your background right now.
With all the lights, it always looks like Christmas.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think the Super Nintendo and the PC Engine one were probably the two best of the bunch in that regard. But I think those, like, to my mind, those are kind of the ways that, like, if you want to examine it, if you want to go at the history more from a series perspective, that way really works. If you want to go at it more from like the evolution of the consoles, I think that works really well too. And just the fact that like those micro consoles were a really cool way to collect things, because they were neat little artifacts and they didn't take up a ton of room. And yeah.
And you get to pretty much use the original controller, which all these games were designed for.
Yep.
You do miss something with emulation. The controllers that come with all the modern stuff, they all just feel like generic versions of a DualShock 4.
Yeah.
Which is fine, right? And it always works fine, but you don't get the full effect of playing these games unless you have the original controller in your hand, which I really, really enjoy. But yeah, again, I just wish that those micro consoles just took it one step further, and then got as many developers on board as possible, and opened up a little mini store online, and you could just purchase each, more and more games for, because I think all of those mini consoles you could open up and just add games, right? And so it's like, man, people are going to do this anyway, so why not make some money off of it?
Yeah, the emulation scene like cracked those all almost immediately, and like came up with basically exactly what you're saying.
Right. Actually, thank God for the emulation scene, because they were the only ones that made the PlayStation 1 Mini worthwhile.
Right.
Like, that was a piece of crap until the emulation guys got at it.
Yeah, that was they almost all of them were really good. That was the one where it was like, ooh, what happened? Come on. So like I know you brought up Sony like having a problem earlier, and it's like, is it just Sony? Is it like, is everybody else struggling in the same way?
I think it's everybody.
It is, I know, but
we're in such a weird time, man. I don't know. Like, I don't even play lots of AAA games. I'm just tired of it taking 4, 5, 6 years for games to come out. Like, back in the PS2 era, it was like 2 years was a long dev cycle, and there's something about that is really appealing to me. Right? It's like, could games get back down to $50 or $60? I mean, they never will, because now that we're paying $70, they'll never reverse that. But I do think that companies need to explore that pricing scale and explore that development cycle scale a little bit more, because I think we don't just need to be playing AAA or quadruple A games all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
No, agreed. Well, what about to turn it back around? What do you see as far as like what would be your ideal vision of this kind of setup?
I think my problem is that my ideal changes constantly, right? Part of me is like, oh, how am I going to enjoy video game history? And at one point, and for most of my life, it was about collecting the games and having them on a shelf, and finding a way to have all the old school systems plugged in at the same time. And so, but then that got out of control. And so then the next step is, well, what do we do from here? And and then the Polymega came along, and I was like, this is a really good idea, right? I get to use my collection and play my games, but like not actually have to use them. This is a great idea. And then that, has its own set of problems. And then it was like, oh, I can just emulate everything on one box. And then you kind of, by emulating everything and having an entire room of games be consolidated to a box that's this big. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, I've solved this space problem, but now I'm missing out on the the whole appeal. Like there's a whole appeal of retro gaming that has nothing to do with playing games.
Yeah.
Hey, it's like looking at the old box art and actually, as I said before, holding the cartridge, putting that in the cartridge slot, and using the controller it was designed for. And so I don't really know, Mike. I've gone back and forth on this, and I keep thinking about the different things that I want. Uh, but I just want stuff to keep coming out, right? Like I did not hesitate for a second when that Wonder Boy collection was announced. I was like, this is so cool. I can't wait to have all these in the same place again. And so hopefully that's the bare minimum that we keep getting, and so that all these games are always accessible. But I was talking to a few people before we started the show, and I was like, well, what am I looking for? Like, what is the ideal for me? Because I've played most of these games now. It's like, do I want access to be able to play them all? I mean, I've got that through emulation. And so one of my friends said, this electronic gaming monthly compendium thing is great. This, N64 anthology book that you have is great. But we need to start at the very beginning. And we need to create anthologies of each year of video gaming. Right? So go back to, I mean, and the question is like, when is each person get on board and become interested in this, right?
Yeah.
So they start in like 1978, and you go, probably 5 people are going to buy that book, right? But each book is, this nice deluxe hardcover, interviews with people, every game that came out on every console during the course of that year, and and to try to preserve the knowledge of it, if not the game itself, which probably been preserved somewhere else. To the best of their ability. And it would be really interesting to see, like, as you get to 79, 80, 81, 82, people, more and more people start getting on board, because that's their childhood. That's when they got into gaming.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And the books obviously get a little bit bigger because a lot more games came out each year. And I think that would be really cool. Like, I mean, I think that I would be really happy dedicating a bookshelf to that project, where it was like, over the course of 10, 20 years, they put out 30 books, like, of the history of gaming. And I think that would be, enough for me personally, because at this point, it's, for me, again, like I said, it's more about the knowledge of these games and making sure that the existence of some of these games are documented, not so much about even having the ability to play them. And also, if some of these canceled games found their way, and a lot of them have, right? Like that canceled Castlevania game for the Dreamcast, was that Resurrection?
Yeah.
Like, you can actually play that, but and I do follow plenty of YouTubers that keep getting their hands on early versions of games and unreleased games, and then make those available for the public. I think all that's really, really important. So I don't have like the ultimate answer. I think I just have one that sort of suits me.
Okay.
And I think I like that, the just the yearly anthologies, and just have a look back and enjoy it without even having to like boot up an old console or something.
Yeah, no. And I think the nice thing about that is that, just judging by some of the other books and works that I've seen come out, I mean, I think Jeremy Parish has done something somewhat similar to that. I mean, not year by year exactly what you're saying, but like he'll do kind of these like he'll focus on a specific console and then do like a stretch of their games and that kind of stuff between like a few years. But so I would assume something like that will eventually happen. It just seems like we're trending in that direction with some of the other books and things that I've seen coming out. So it's very achievable.
There's definitely the since I'm so heavily into VR, I would like to, I would like these two worlds to blend at some point, and be able to walk up to an old arcade and like be able to go in and and just be able to play these games the way that they were originally made. Like there's a game called Arcade Paradise in VR that I absolutely love. But they're not real arcade games. They're arcade games that the developers made for this game. But I would love just having that feeling of being in an old smoky, arcade back in the 90s, and being able to walk up to a Street Fighter 2 machine, and you also be in VR and walk up and be like, put your quarter down, like, and, you know what I mean, just like maybe like a social space where all
Yeah,
these games
yeah.
are available and you can interact with them the way that you would have 30 years ago. I think that would be maybe, taking it further beyond the books, like recreating the experience of when you were a kid, and when you got to play these games, and like, just the sounds of the arcade. That's something that doesn't really get recreated well when you play those arcade games at home, right? That tinny
Yeah.
sound that, like, I think everybody remembers from going to an arcade. These are things that I want, like, especially hearing them from like 17 different machines all at
Right.
once.
Yeah.
Right, that's an experience you can't really replicate at home, and so that's why I think that VR might be the ultimate record keeper for some of these things, like to not only document the game itself, but also the experience of how you might have played it for the first time.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a really cool idea. I know our mutual friend Andy actually runs an arcade, and like it's trying to, even with actual hardware and an actual space, it's very difficult to recapture that kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, well, do we want to?
We've exhausted that, I think.
I mean, I suppose there's other things that we could say, but oh, and Cat's gonna jump on the. Well, you're not recording, so the cat can jump all over your keyboard. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Might just end the call, that's all.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
just like awkwardly end the episode. No, I mean, I think like there's probably more to say, but that feels like a pretty meaningful point to end things on. So,
Nice. As a complete aside that's only tangentially related, hi.
I'm just giving you kitty kisses.
Um, she wanted to make sure I still loved her. I guess I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was nothing is good on TV anymore. Like, I just
No.
can't get into anything.
No.
I've had an issue with like anything that's new. I just got a weird mental block, and I needed something that was comforting and
Sure.
reassuring in these strange times we live in, Mike.
Yeah,
And
that sounds fair. I bet you're not alone in that.
I needed an audio video hug.
Yes.
so
Yeah.
so I started watching the X-Files.
Okay.
From episode 1, and so this is related. Trust me.
Yeah. No.
Because
I
the last time I tried to watch the show, I don't know what streaming service it was on or what the deal was, but the quality was so bad. It was presented in 4:3. It looked like someone had taped over a VHS tape 5 times, and I was like, was this the quality of the show back when it first? I mean, because remember, Fox was like not a real channel,
No,
and they had no budget for a
Yeah.
long time, and it was shows like The Simpsons, The X-Files that like caused them to
Yeah.
gain a lot of popularity and start making a lot of money. And so I was like, man, was this just the way the show was? And we were all watching on 25-inch CRT televisions, and so we didn't know. So I was pleasantly surprised when this time I started rewatching them, and they're presented in like 16:9 and like HD, and they look like, I mean, somebody went back and preserved these things and made sure to get like the original film or whatever in order to put these back together, dude, because no, who was filming in HD or in 16:9 for broadcast network television? In what year was that? 92?
Like, yeah, I was gonna say 1992. I think. Yeah.
Right? No one was. And so how this stuff got preserved, beyond me. But I was so happy when I started. I was like, this looks really good. I don't know what version I was watching the last time, but this is such an improvement that I'm like just really enjoying it as if it's the first time.
Have you run into anything yet though where like, so a few years back I rewatched Star Trek: The Next Generation on Blu-ray.
Nice.
I'm not a big Star Trek guy, but my dad was growing up, so kind of the same thing. It was during the pandemic, and I just wanted something like familiar. And the Blu-ray was so crisp that you could like see like pimples and stuff on the actors, and like you could see stuff reflected in the glass that you couldn't in the, so like you'd see people with like cameras and stuff, because like it, like you said, it wasn't designed to be recorded that way, and then when they like cleaned it up, they just like caught all this extra, or it wasn't, I shouldn't say it wasn't designed to be recorded, it wasn't designed to be broadcast that way,
Right.
So like when they cleaned it up, suddenly you're catching all of this, like when they expand the aspect ratio, there's like crap on the floor and like
That's really funny. No, because my dad and I actually, when my dad first retired, I'd head over to his house every day. My mom wanted me to like just check on him, make sure he was keeping busy and stuff, you know. 'Cause you hear all the time people retired and they like, don't know what to do with themselves.
right, yeah,
My dad was fine.
yeah, from what you've
so
said
he-
about
yeah.
him, yeah.
Yeah, so because he's like an online gamer, man. He's
Yeah.
like he's busy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I started coming over like every Tuesday or something with my like laundry basket. I'd throw a bunch of clothes in the washer. We'd have a beer together, make some lunch, and then we'd go and watch an episode or 2 or 3 of Star Trek Next Generation on DVD because he bought the entire box set. This was before streaming, and oh my god, this was before streaming. There are people who are alive, Michael, who do not know what before streaming means.
I know. It's
But yeah,
unfortunate.
we weren't watching the Blu-rays obviously, but we were watching the DVDs, and I don't remember seeing anything like that. And so
No,
now I'm definitely going to pay attention on the X-Files.
Yeah, no, you can't in the DVDs you won't see it, but with the Blu-rays you definitely do.
That's so funny, man. So funny. So not all preservation is what we'd call accurate to our original interpretations.
What was that when like people would do retro games or like updates or things like new retro styled games, and they would be like,
Yeah.
it's like how you remember it, not like how it actually is.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh man. Yep. Cool.
All right. Well, I think we've had an interesting conversation. You know, folks can weigh in on the comments. Hopefully, maybe one way or the other, whatever they think.
This is always the case, Mike, with, you know, even on Gamescast, when we go in, we think we have a good topic and we think we have good opinions on it. Our opinions are never as good as the people watching live, as the people commenting later. So please, like, we definitely want to hear your suggestions and hear about all the things we should have talked about instead.
Yeah. We'll do more episodes because I'm out of ideas. This is it. I'm spent. No more Team Brothership. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me again, Bryan. Thanks to the viewers, the listeners. I don't know how people consume this stuff.
Orally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hopefully. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Until then, I've been Mike.
And I'm Bryan of Team Bryanship.
Yeah. We'll see you real soon. Have a great week, everybody.